take it away.
Perfect. Okay, guys, welcome. And can you guys hear me well? Can you guys like see the PowerPoint and everything well? Perfect. Um, so how like is there a way to see like how many people are attending? Maybe we can try to make it interactive session like where we can have.
Yeah, so we can definitely utilize the chat and the Q&A, and then there also is the option we can try it out and see how it goes. I can unmute people kind of one at a time. So if folks raise their hands with a question, and then I can unmute them and have them ask. We can see how that works. Otherwise, the chat and the Q&A definitely work.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, that should be good. I think that's the best one. So welcome, guys. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm Dr. Luna Garia. I'm a stroke and vascular neurologist. Thank you to Brain and Spine Group for having me here, and thank you guys for joining us. It's very fascinating that you guys choose to be part of neuroscience world, and you would love it. So a couple of disclosure. I don't have any. I was recipient of NIH StrokeNet grant, and part of this work is done with that grant. But again, there is no conflict of interest in my entire presentation. Okay, so why are we talking about stroke? The reason why we talk about stroke is because stroke is a leading cause of mortality and morbidity, like in US and across the world, in fact. So these are a couple of data. I mean, I don't want to like smear you with like big data, but let's put in this way that there are almost 1 million stroke per year, and this is before the COVID times. I think we have far more like right now, especially with the COVID and other conditions going on. It's like number five cause of death like in US, and we might be reaching number 4 again, which we are not proud of course. 1 out of 20 deaths is from stroke. Every 40 seconds someone has a stroke, and every 4 minutes someone dies of a stroke. But believe me, that is not the biggest complication of a stroke. The biggest complication or biggest problem with the stroke is the disability which people have after they have the stroke. And very few people with a stroke die, so remaining of them are remaining disabled for the rest of their life. It's pretty big burden on the system and themselves as well. Imagine a young or like working person like having a stroke and remaining disabled for the rest of their life without much hope for recovery. It's a pretty huge burden all in all. And this burden, 34 million, is just a direct one, but indirect burden is like far more than that. And that's the reason why like we're talking about that a lot. So first and foremost, what is stroke? I mean, it sounds like a child's question that what is stroke, but believe me, like even a lot of doctors who are not neurologists, they have like difficult time figuring out what is stroke. So it's a very simple concept. Keep this in mind, and that will like help you for rest of your lives and careers. Stroke is a damage to brain from interruption of the blood supply to the brain. Very simple as that. There has to be a damage to a brain, and damage has to happen from interruption of its blood supply. A lot of condition can cause damage to a brain, but we call it stroke only when that happens from interruption of the blood supply. Very important lesson. Very simple, but very easy to forget and very easy to remember as well. We primarily divide like that interruption in 2 main ways. One is a ischemic stroke. In that one, like there is an occlusion of an artery which supplies the brain. So it's like kind of a artery which supplies the brain kind of has some like clot or occlusion or XYZ, and that's why there is an interruption of blood supply. And we call that an ischemic stroke. And the second one is a hemorrhagic stroke. Hemorrhagic stroke is the one where there is a bleeding in the brain tissue. And remember, when there is a blood around the tissue or in the tissue, it impairs the function of a tissue. And that's why like there is damage to brain. And that's what we call hemorrhagic stroke. A lot of textbook, a lot of literature says like many various type, but like I'd like to divide into 2 primary subtypes just to make things easier and less complicated. So this is just a graphical presentation of like what happens when you have ischemic stroke and hemorrhagic stroke. On the left side, you see that, okay, on the left side, you see that like, for example, this side, you see that there is a starting from the bottom, like there is a heart here in the bottom. Then there is a blood vessel. Most of them are carotid arteries, internal and external. There is a plaque or there is a clot going inside the artery, and there is interruption of supply. That part is dead, and that part is we call it ischemic stroke. At the same time, like see the other side. There is, for some reason, a blood in a part of a brain, as we see it here in the red like marker, and that's why like there is some impairment in blood tissue and brain tissue, and that's why you have a stroke. You call it hemorrhagic stroke. The one above shows like blood all around the brain, and there is an interruption and there is a dysfunction of blood and brain, and that is a hemorrhagic stroke, but this is a different kind. So pretty easy in a way that there is a ischemic stroke and hemorrhagic stroke. So if you like try to see the different subtypes, I mean, as you can see here, the majority of stroke which we come across, like almost 80 to 85%, they are ischemic stroke, and the other ones are hemorrhagic stroke, like around 15 to 20%, give or take, like based on like how you see your data and where do you see from. But like that's the typical mixture we like typically come across, and I think that's what is happening for last long time, and I think that will continue because like of like etiology and pathogenesis. So what does a stroke do? How do the patient with stroke present? Like it's a very simple concept as well, like which is somehow made complicated by a lot of people, but like keep it very simple here. Whenever you have a stroke, you have impairment in function of that particular part of a brain which is affected. In other words, like if you have a stroke in the left side of your brain, the function of left side of a brain is affected, which is primarily speech in most people, right side of your body and face. If a right side of a brain is affected, you have impairment in left side of a face and body, as well as have a neglect. If brainstem is affected, your cranial nerves are damaged, you have like some decrease in alertness. You might have weakness on both sides of a body depending on size, but it's pretty simple. I mean, you know, when you have a stroke, only the function of brain which is affected should be like affected rather than like everything and anything. And keep this in mind, and you might be able to see stroke differently from a lot of other conditions which impairs your brain. So coming back to like a little bit of background or pathogenesis, let's talk about the etiology of stroke. That what causes you a stroke? How do you have a stroke, or how do someone have a stroke? So I'll divide into main two portions, ischemic and hemorrhagic. As we talked earlier, ischemic stroke happens whenever you have occlusion of an artery which supplies the brain. So for that to happen, like there should be some occlusion or some interruption in blood supply to brain. There are various pathogenesis or various type of ischemic stroke. I like to divide it following one: embolic, lacunar, inflammatory, hypercoagulable, cryptogenic, and others. So let's go one by one. What is an embolic stroke? What happens in embolic stroke? This is an MRI here, and you might see like a lot of pictures here in the presentation, because I think a picture can speak more than 1,000 words, and it can also like explain you things better. So as you can see here, this is like MRI of a brain. Whenever you have embolic stroke, like you have embolization in different parts of brain, like you see here in the left side of a brain, here is a right side like basal ganglia, like parietal lobe. Again, the left side, right side, brainstem, cerebellum. In other words, when you have embolic stroke, there is some emboli coming from different parts of a body. It goes to the brain, and you have embolic stroke. The key feature is that like typically embolic stroke would have multiple vascular distribution. In other words, like if there is an emboli coming out of a brain and lodging into the artery of a brain, you would see that to happen in more than one supply. I mean, that's a typical hallmark feature. There are different kinds of embolic stroke as well. Like the main ones are cardioembolic, where emboli comes from the heart. Atheroembolic, where like there is some atherosclerosis or some plaque in the part of body, and that dislodges a thrombus, which becomes emboli. Paradoxical and others. So first and foremost, cardioembolic. It means that there is an emboli from a heart. There is a clot from the heart which goes all the way to the brain, and that's when you have a stroke. The most common reason which we think is like atrial fibrillation, That's very common in elderly population. As you grow older, your heart gets older as well. You might be young at heart, but still your heart gets older, like physiologically and anatomically. And when your heart gets older, like you sometimes have abnormal discharges from your heart, you have atrial fibrillation, and your heart start beating irregularly. And like as you see in the paragraph picture over here, the clot will form like somewhere like in your left atrium, and it will like go all the way to your brain, and that's when you have a stroke. Another like feature is like left ventricular thrombus, where there is a thrombus in like a part of your like heart, like as you see here. The second picture, like there is a thrombus like formation, like for some reason in like a part of your heart, left ventricle. It will go to like rest of your body. The picture here, like on the right side top, will like show what happens like when you have atrial appendage, or what happens when you have atrial fibrillation. Like blood will form here, like clot will form here, and like it will go to different parts of your brain. Then there are some other causes, like for example, infective endocarditis. You might be hearing a lot about that, even like in the first few years of a med school. So for some reason, like people have infection to their body and the infection in the heart. When the infection is affecting the valve, you call it infective endocarditis. And there are like a couple of clots, mostly septic clots, which forms on your valve. The clot get dislodged. It goes to different parts of your brain, and you have embolic stroke from infective endocarditis. Though this is a very nice picture, like showing that one. Then there are other reasons like atrial thrombus, atrial myxoma, like all these kind of things. But these are the common reason why you have like stroke, embolic stroke coming from your heart. Then another common reason is atheroembolic. Atheroembolic stroke is a stroke when you have embolization in different part of your artery supplying your brain. Thrombus formation there, that thrombus get dislodged as you see in this picture. Now the bottom one is a normal carotid artery. The one in the middle is like kind of a disease artery. As you see, there are a lot of plaques here. Maybe this person was smoking or drinking or like doing things which are not like healthy. And for that reason, like there are a lot of plaque formation here. One of that plaque broke loose, goes to like your brain, and that causes you to have a stroke. And that's like atheroembolic stroke. The more common site where you have atheroembolic strokes are like site where there is more likelihood of formation of thrombus. Carotid bifurcation is another common site. There is a lot of like turbulent flow over there. Vertebral origin is like one of the common site as well. You also have it more intracranially. Smoker, hyperlipidemia, hypertension are common causes of like embolization from like atheroembolic stroke. And that's the reason like why you have a thrombotic stroke. These are the common reason, but there are many uncommon as well. One of the common reason which people don't like to hear is a chiropractor. I mean, we call it a chiropractor stroke. I mean, a lot of chiropractor won't like it, but that's a fact, and we have to like acknowledge that. So what happens is when you have like sudden twisting of your neck, sometimes you have dissection in your arteries, as you see here in picture A. A flap opens up. Then your body, like as it's supposed to do, like it tries to like, like heal the dissection. It tries to like, heal the flap. And in that process, a lot of clots are formed. Some of this clot will get dislodged and go to like distal part, and it will like just like go to brain as well. And that's when you have a stroke. That's a very common stroke of like, especially younger population. I still remember like time when I was in my fellowship training when we had like one, I would say celebrity like who had like chiropractor exercise or something like that. She was a very popular model. I mean, I cannot tell the name. She had a stroke and she just passed away after a couple of days. These are like life-changing experience you see, and there's a reason why one should avoid those kind of activities. But again, dissection can cause you have a stroke. Then there is one very common thing, paradoxical embolization. What is paradoxical emboli? So when you have embolization in your vein, somehow it crosses your heart or like goes to your arteries and like goes to your brain. That's when you have paradoxical embolization. The picture here is like shows a person having DVT. As you can see, like DVT is not very uncommon. It does happen like in a lot of condition. but it doesn't necessarily cause you to have a stroke because the DVT would be like clot in the vein. It should typically go to your lung, get dissolved over there, or maybe cause pulmonary embolism. But like to go to artery is not a common occurrence. When does it occur? For example, if you have PFO is like patent foramen oval. A lot of people are born with that. It's completely normal to have it. It's a variant. But whenever you have like clot in your vein, for some reason your like a PFO opens up as is shown in this picture, clot will go to the other side of your heart, will go from right atrium to the left atrium, and then cause all kind of damage. It can also happen like when you have heavy malformation or some innumerous things where like there is a connection between artery and vein, and the venous stroke becomes arterial stroke. Now, another type of stroke, lacunar stroke. Lacunar stroke are most common kind of a stroke you see. This picture very beautifully explains what happens when you have lacunar stroke. So like these are the common signs where you have lacunar stroke. And this is a very good picture to like show it like what happens. So for numerous reasons, like for example, you have high blood pressure, you have diabetes, you have like high cholesterol, you are having a lot of stress, or you have some inflammation. For numerous reasons, like there is some damage to your like small arteries or arterioles supplying your brain, as you can see here. Like you started having lipohyalinosis here, like the damage to the artery. And eventually when it completely closes, the part which is supplied by that will stroke out, and that's when you have lacunar stroke. It's a pretty common stroke. I mean, most commonly happen in like those with like vascular risk factors which are not controlled. There are features of this stroke is a lacunar stroke. They are like having a lot of variation. For example, if patient comes with a lacunar stroke, you might have fluctuation in symptoms for a couple of days, and then you have a final outcome. In other words, like lacunar stroke can have a lot of fluctuation in symptom. Sometimes in beginning you don't have bad symptoms, but after a couple of days you have worse symptoms. So that's a hallmark feature of lacunar stroke. For embolic stroke, it's opposite. You have symptoms maximum at onset, and then it starts getting better. Then there are other like less common reason of stroke. For example, inflammatory stroke. When you have some inflammation in your arteries, like it's shown in this picture here, like you started having free radicals, you have like started having immune cells, and slowly this artery like starts getting clogged up and start getting constricted, and eventually the supply of that artery becomes impaired. So the part of brain which is supplied by that particular artery, it gets like clogged, and there is an interruption of supply, and you have a stroke like that. The most common cause is like vasculitis. You might have heard this word a lot, CNS vasculitis or like vasculitis. It can also happen like when you have sickle cell disease, like when there's like sickle cell formation, like the sickle cell like keeps on irritating your arteries or arterioles, you eventually have a stroke. Very common reason these days, especially for some reason in last couple of months I've seen, especially in Florida, that there are a lot of polysubstance abuses coming like this. There's maybe borders are opening up, maybe like there is more and more like supplies of illicit drugs. But long story short, like when you do polysubstance abuse, it affects your artery very badly, and you come with very bad stroke. Some infection can also cause that. For example, varicella is notorious to cause like inflammation to your blood vessel and you to have a stroke. This is a very beautiful picture to show that what happens when you have vasculitis or inflammation. The left side is a diagnostic angiogram. You call it a conventional angiogram. And as you can see that like there are a lot of arrows over here, and I think you might see it pretty well on your side as well, but all these arrows are suggestive like of any occlusion or like a clogging right where the arteries are, and this clogging eventually like causes a stroke, as you see on the right side. Then there are other reasons like hypercoagulable condition where your blood is thick or hypercoagulable, you have a stroke. The most common reason of hypercoagulability is a secondary hypercoagulable state. For example, if you have malignancy or some reason for your blood to be hypercoagulable, eventually you will have like clot formation and you will have a stroke. These days, like is very common or like getting more and more common, you might be hearing it a lot. There's some infection, especially like something like COVID, somehow like it causes like a cascade of changes in your immunological cycle. It eventually leads you to have like clot formation and you to have a stroke. It was not so common earlier, but now it for COVID, for some reason, like people have a lot of hypercoagulable condition more than what it used to be. So there are two primary type of primary hypercoagulable condition, arterial and venous. I mean, arterial conditions like typically causes stroke directly. For venous condition to have a stroke, you need to have some paradoxical embolization, maybe by PFO. It's not as common, but like it's getting more and more common, and that's always good to consider. Then there is a very popular type of a stroke, cryptogenic stroke. What is a cryptogenic stroke? The picture here says pretty well. I don't know. You need to tell me. In other words, like whenever we cannot figure out etiology or cause of a stroke, we call it a cryptogenic stroke. Very simple, but like sometimes we are still not able to figure out the reason of a cause, and that becomes cryptogenic stroke. Then there are hemorrhagic strokes. There are different kind of hemorrhage which happens in your brain, which impairs the blood brain tissues. Couple of like common ones are hypertensive, lobar, vascular malformation, venous, and traumatic. So this slide pretty much like explains it very well. There is a primary intracerebral hemorrhage, where like hemorrhage happens because of some intrinsic reason inside the brain, or like without any other reason. And there is a secondary intracerebral hemorrhage. Secondary happens like when there is some like structural abnormality in the brain, and that predisposes you to have a brain hemorrhage. The more common is the hypertensive hemorrhage. When your blood pressure goes very high, some of the arteries inside your brain like gets ruptured. There is a thing called Charcot-Bouchard aneurysm, which is a small aneurysm like in millimeters. Like when someone has like for a long time, eventually a couple of them breaks off and you have a bleed. The most common site is basal ganglia, thalamus, cerebellum, and pons. This picture can explain pretty nicely. So like as you see B, just like basal ganglia, C like as thalamus, D is a pons, and like E here is a cerebellum. And these are the most common site of hypertensive bleeds. Another common reason is like lobar hemorrhage. It happens more and more in elderly population, and now like with the increasing lifespan, more and more people like get demented or they have like some amyloid angiopathy. This is what happens when you have amyloid angiopathy. Like you started having microbleeds in the brain, and then for some reason, like maybe your blood pressure is high or you're on a blood thinner or XYZ, those microbleeds become major bleeds like this, and you have a very big hemorrhage in your brain. It's very common in elderly these days, but it's always good to keep that in mind. Then there are like venous stroke. Like venous strokes are like you might be hearing a lot about the venous stroke, especially after the COVID vaccination. I still believe that like they are less common compared to the people dying from COVID itself. Regardless, I mean, what happens is that like for some reason you have a clot formation in your venous sinus, as it's shown over here. Because of that clot, there is a lot of congestion, a lot of back pressure, and eventually there is a bleed in the brain because of the back pressure, and that's when you have like venous stroke. Typical feature of a venous stroke is venous sinus thrombosis, and the location are like pretty atypical for other bleeds. You should always keep like a venous sinus thrombosis as a cause of bleed in a young population, and also like in someone with atypical bleed. Another thing is a vascular malformation. The most common or like most spoke about is the AV malformation. For some reason, you have like communication between arteries and veins, and instead of capillaries, there is like a directly artery going to the vein, arterial and vein, and you see this kind of a feature. And there's abnormal tissue, and that's more prone to bleed than the normal brain tissue. This is one of the very hallmark picture of AV malformation. As you can see in AV malformation, it's a big size, and in between the AV malformation, there are a couple of normal brain tissues. Another common thing is a cavernoma. Cavernoma is like developmental anomaly where you have like abnormal formation of vein. Typically, it's popcorn appearance, like as you see here. Typically, there is no normal brain tissue in between. Then you might have heard of aneurysm, like as the picture like below deficits, like you have aneurysm here, which is normal or like unruptured. Finally, it ruptures and like goes to like your subarachnoid space, and you have aneurysmal bleed. These are the common side of aneurysm. ACOM is very common, PCOM is very common, tip of MCA is very common, and basilar tip is very common. So again, this was etiology. Now, how do we have presentation? What happens when you have a stroke? As we talked earlier, this is the same slide from earlier. Stroke does a very simple thing. It impairs the function of the affected part of the brain. If your left part is affected, then that function is affected. Right part is affected, then that, and the brainstem, then that. But like a couple of like common stroke syndromes, left MCA syndrome, where you have like aphasia most of the times in 95% of population in the right-handed and 50% in left-handed. Your speech center is in left side. So if that is affected, your aphasia, it can be expressed, you are receptive. You can have right hemiparesis, weakness on the right side of your body. You can have neglect on the right side as well. If it is on the other side of your body, right MCA, you have left-sided weakness, but this is very common, profound neglect. Neglect is a thing which people, in other words, like they have a stroke, but they don't realize that they have a deficit from that. And that's a very difficult thing to overcome. I still remember one of my mentor, Kenneth Heilman, like talking about his experience. And this was the experience he was talking about. As you can see here, like there is a plate and there is a pasta in the plate, and the patient has already only ate the pasta on the right side, but it does not even touch something on the left side. So you know why that happens? Because patient does not realize that there is something on the left side. And that's why this patient was only eating half of his plate or her plate and complaining that he or she is not getting enough food. But the reality was that like that patient was unable to see what's on the left side and realize what's on the left side. And patient was neglecting whatever was on the left side of the body. And that's what happens in right MCA stroke. How do you manage stroke? I mean, we talked about like all this etiology and clinical features and all. How do you manage a stroke? So this is how the management of stroke used to be like maybe a couple of decades back. As you see in the bottom here, right, there is a patient and the left side neurologist. And neurologists used to be called armchair intellectual. I mean, sometimes we have to make fun of ourselves. And this is how it was like back in the days. As you can see, this doctor, like a very smart appearing doctor sitting on the chair and talking to a patient. That for what you see with the onset of dysarthria, ipsilateral Horner syndrome, and diminished sensation to the contralateral body, we can isolate this stroke to the posterior circulation, specifically lateral medullary infarct. Then patient is asking the doctor, very good doctor, but what can we do about it? And doctor was telling nothing, but isn't it fascinating? In other words, like couple of decades ago, like all the doctors, all the neurologists were like able to identify stroke and have a different stroke syndrome, but there was nothing they could do about it. But things change after that, and it's because of this guy here. Like his name is Justin Zivin. Like he was the first one who used TPA for stroke. That was used in 1885 for the first time in the Reds. People were calling him crazy at the time. Then he started using for stroke. People were still calling him crazy. And it took a couple of years before people to figure out that he was a genius. And then they started realizing that, oh man, this guy found something which is very intuitive. And after a couple of years of hard work, like they were able to finally show that like TPA helps in minimizing the stroke size or even curing the symptoms. And that's a very key thing that happened in 1995. And since then, like we started using TPA for stroke patient. Fortunately, I was able to work with him. I was his last fellow. I mean, this guy, Justin Zivin, he passed away like a couple of years ago, and like they still call him stroke of genius. And since like his work, all of us are starting using TPA for stroke patient, which is a life-changing experience for patient. And then we have a lot of improvement in the stroke care. So as we see here, I divide this into like a couple of phases. Before 1995, we are not doing much for the stroke patients. We were just like, trying to minimize the complications such as pneumonia and UTI and those things. And we were just like, acting like an armchair intellectual, like as we saw in a couple of slides back, talking good things about the stroke, but not doing much about it. Then we had something which you could use for stroke patient. We had TPA, which was like known to help like patients a lot. And initially it was used for 3 hours or up to 3 hours from stroke onset, but then like we found out that it can work up to 4.5 hours in a good way. And we have been doing it since then. Pretty much like 2 to 9% of patients with stroke can get TPA, and you see remarkable improvement with like in the stroke patient with the TPA. Then like we started figuring out that like if there's a big clot and if you could take out the clot in the right time in the right patient, you have remarkable improvement. And that's when like from 2014 itself, we started like doing the thrombectomy. We were doing thrombectomy even before that, but like in 2014, we started realizing that it does work for patient. There are trials which shows that it works for the patient, and it become a guideline. So since that time, like thrombectomy is also like offered in patient like up to 6 hours. Then like from 2018, we figured out like that it can be offered up to 24 hours in the right pool of patient, right pool of population, and that becomes standard of care. It can be offered in like maybe up to 2 to 4% of patient, like up to 24 hours, but still it's good to know. So this is like again the same thing, like the left side number 1, you do CT scan on all the patient with a stroke. You also do CT angiogram. Approximately in 10% of population, you find like large vessel occlusion, as you see in this patient. The yellow arrow is like pointing towards left MCA occlusion. And the right one here is like a rapid software or like Wiz software or perfusion studies. This is like the picture of that. It's very useful study to figure out that how much part of, because keep in mind, once you have a stroke, once a part of brain is dead, you cannot get it back. Whatever we are doing is to prevent from another part from dying. In other words, like the part of brain which is at risk of dying but not yet dead, and that's what we are trying to save here. So as you can see here, like this part of a brain here, like is at risk of dying if nothing is done about that. But that part is still not dead, and that's why this patient would be eligible for thrombectomy. It's a pretty complicated thing. I mean, it would be more than one just like 5-minute like talk about this particular thing, but it's pretty fascinating. If you want to know, I can always talk more about that. So what are the common, I was asked to like give the common indication for TPA, but I think I should rather talk about contraindication, because like indication for TPA is that when someone has a stroke, clinical features of a stroke, and when they come within 4.5 hours, you should just give them TPA. Unless until you have these contraindications. The common ones are these ones. And again, like talk to your neurologist or stroke doctor like before like making decision yourself. But these are the common contraindications which are practiced in our like stroke world. Obviously, there has to be like patient-to-patient based decision making, and we should involve the patient in the decision as well. But these are the common ones. We should treat each patient differently, obviously, but these are the common ones. The most common is intracranial hemorrhage. If you're bleeding the brain, obviously, like you're not treating with a TPA. If you have a history of intracranial hemorrhage, that's a relative contraindication. If you have some structural abnormality in your brain, which is a risk of causing bleeding, then you should like avoid TPA in those patients. If you had like a big surgery in past 3 months, neurosurgery or head trauma or stroke, that's a relative contraindication. If you're actively bleeding from other part of your body, then like that's a contraindication, relative one. You should discuss the patient about the risk and benefit. If you're under control hypertension, then in that case, it's better to control with labetalol or nicardipine and control it before giving TPA. If your blood glucose is less than 50 or more than 450, then you should control the glucose, and if patients still have symptoms, then you can decide again if to give TPA or no. If you have non-bleeding paresthesis, if your platelet is like less than 100,000, then you should discuss with the patient risk and benefit. You should never say no, but just discuss with them. If you are on blood thinner within last 48 hours, then it's still a contraindication, especially when you are on heparin or PTT is elevated. If you're on warfarin or INR is 1.7 or more. If you're on novel anticoagulation like Eliquis or Pradaxa or Xarelto. As I was talking to you earlier, this is one of the patient like I saw a couple of weeks ago. As you can see, this patient like came with a right-sided weakness, aphasia, was found down. Was not a TPA candidate because like we did not know when was the last time patient was normal. It was more than 4.5 hours ago. We scanned the patient. We found the left MCA occlusion over here. We did the perfusion study and we found that like a lot of brain tissue was still salvageable, as we can see here and here. We went and took out like the clot from the left MCA, and that patient went home after a couple of days. I mean, this can be remarkable. If we would not have done that, most likely that patient would have either died or spent the rest of their life in rehab or nursing facility because of the size of stroke. And this is an acknowledgement. Like this is my mentor, Dr. Justin Zivin. Like I inspired a lot from like him and my other colleagues. And if you have any questions, this is my email. The first one is a personal one. Second one is like my hospital email. Feel free to ask me if any question. And thank you again to Brain and Spine Group for like this opportunity to talk. And now I think it's a time for question and answers.
Hey everyone, Ryan Rad here from neurosurgerytraining.org. If you like that video, subscribe and donate to keep our content available for medical students across the world.